We, written by Russian author Yevgeny Zamyatin between 1920 and 1921, stands as the original modern dystopia, predating both Brave New World and 1984. Set in the future totalitarian one state, citizens are identified by numbers rather than names, with the protagonist known as D503. The society features constant surveillance through transparent glass walls that eliminate privacy, monitored by guardians who hunt down thought crimes. In this world, the Benefactor controls all information and literature, deciding what citizens can read or know. Zamyatin wrote this explicit critique of Soviet collectivism in response to the growing authoritarianism under Lenin. The book depicts a society where independent thought is crushed and history is carefully controlled. The irony is devastating. We was never published in Soviet Russia during Zamyatin's lifetime, becoming one of the longest banned books in Russian history. Zamyatin faced persecution from Soviet authorities for writing it and had to smuggle the manuscript to the West for publication. The book remained officially banned until 1988 during Glasnost, over 6 decades after its creation. It was first published in English in 1924, reaching Western audiences while remaining forbidden in its homeland. George Orwell later acknowledged that we directly influenced his writing of 1984. The novel's vision of a transparent society where privacy is eliminated and thoughts are monitored proved prophetic not just in its content, but in its own fate, as the book warning about totalitarian censorship became a prime target of exactly that censorship. Brave New World. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, published in 1932, depicts a future world state set in the year 2540, or 632 AF after Ford, where society controls citizens through genetic engineering, conditioning, and the drug soma. In this dystopia, books and history are heavily censored or destroyed, with only select world controllers permitted access to literature. Shakespeare is explicitly banned as dangerous old literature, and citizens are conditioned from birth to accept their predetermined roles in a caste system divided into alphas, betas, gammas, deltas, and epsilons. The character Mustafa Mond, a world controller, explains in detail why books must be banned to maintain social stability, with the regime's motto being, "They haven't any use for old things here." The novel contains extensive discussions of censorship as a tool of control. The supreme irony arrived when the book itself faced exactly the censorship it depicted. Ireland banned Brave New World until the 1960s for anti-family content. India challenged it in the 1930s, and Australia banned it until 1937. Throughout the 1980s to 2010s, it was repeatedly removed from American classrooms, challenged as recently as the 2010s. The reasons for banning included sexual content, drug use, and themes challenging authority, precisely the mechanisms of control Huxley warned against in the novel. The book that predicted a society maintaining order through pleasure, drugs, and information control was itself controlled for depicting those very things, fulfilling its own dark prophecy about how authorities suppress uncomfortable truths about power and manipulation. Animal Farm. George Orwell's Animal Farm, published in 1945, is an allegorical novella satirizing Soviet totalitarianism through the story of farm animals overthrowing their human masters. The pigs gradually seize control and begin systematically rewriting history in the farm's foundational commandments. The character Squealer serves as propaganda minister, controlling all information and manipulating the animals' memories. The original 7 commandments painted on the barn wall are progressively altered until only one remains. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The pig Napoleon erases Snowball from history after expelling him, mirroring Stalin's treatment of Trotsky. The slogan, "4 legs good, 2 legs bad," eventually transforms into 4 legs good, 2 legs better, demonstrating total corruption of original principles. Orwell directly critiqued Stalin's systematic rewriting of Soviet history and the manipulation of truth for political power. The book's fate mirrored its content perfectly. During World War II, Orwell struggled to find a British publisher due to pro-Soviet sentiment, with both Faber and Jonathan Cape rejecting it for political reasons. After publication, the Soviet Union banned it until 1990. Kenya banned it in 1991 for being critical of government. The United Arab Emirates banned it for containing talking pigs, which conflicted with Islamic dietary laws. Cuba and North Korea also banned it. The ultimate irony remains that a book about totalitarian regimes rewriting history was itself suppressed, rejected, and banned by governments uncomfortable with its message, proving Orwell's warnings about political censorship were not merely fictional, but immediate and real. 1984. George Orwell's 1984, published in 1949, presents a totalitarian Oceania, where the government systematically controls all information and rewrites history. The protagonist, Winston Smith, works in the records department of the Ministry of Truth, where his job is literally to destroy and rewrite past newspapers to match the party's current narrative. Documents deemed inconvenient are thrown into memory holes where they're incinerated. The party develops newspeak, a language designed to make thought crime linguistically impossible by eliminating words for rebellious concepts. Thought police monitor citizens for any sign of dissent. The forbidden book within the novel, Goldstein's The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism, represents dangerous knowledge the party must suppress. The party's slogan declares who controls the past, controls the future, an explicit statement about censorship's power. Published just 4 years after Animal Farm, Orwell's vision proved prophetic about its own fate. The Soviet Union banned 1984 until 1988, nearly 4 decades. In 1981, Jackson County, Florida challenged it for being pro-communist, a bizarre irony given the book's anti-totalitarian message. China has banned it at various times. American schools have challenged it repeatedly for sexual content and political themes. The ultimate paradox remains that various regimes banned a book specifically about a regime that bans books. Sales of 1984 spike whenever censorship becomes news, as people recognize Orwell's warnings playing out in reality. The book depicting a government that destroys inconvenient information was itself deemed inconvenient information by multiple governments, proving that the instinct to control dangerous ideas transcends ideology and remains a universal temptation of power. Fahrenheit 451. Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, published in 1953, literally depicts a future where firemen burn books and reading is illegal. The title refers to 451 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature at which book paper allegedly catches fire. Protagonist Guy Montag works as a fireman whose job is burning books, with the opening line declaring it was a pleasure to burn. Society has outlawed all literature, and mechanical hounds hunt down book owners. Captain Beatty explains how society gradually chose to ban books themselves, preferring the comfort of television walls to the challenge of reading. The novel ends with a group of people who've memorized entire books to preserve them after civilization's collapse. Bradbury wrote the manuscript in UCLA's library basement on a rented typewriter. The supreme irony arrived when his publisher Ballantine released a censored edition in 1967, secretly removing words like hell and damn without informing Bradbury. For 12 years, from 1967 to 1979, a book about book burning existed in a burned version. Bradbury didn't discover this censorship until 1979 and was furious. Some schools unknowingly assigned the censored version to students. Beyond this meta-ironic publisher censorship, the book faced challenges in various American schools from the 1990s onward. It was challenged in Alton, Illinois for questionable themes. The book warning about a society that burns books was effectively burned by editors who altered its text, then challenged by schools uncomfortable with its message. Bradbury's nightmare scenario of casual censorship becoming normalized proved true in the most unexpected way, through his own publisher sanitizing his anti-censorship manifesto. A Clockwork Orange. Anthony Burgess's A Clockwork Orange, published in 1962, depicts a near-future Britain where violent youth gang member Alex undergoes the Ludovico technique, a government program using psychological conditioning to control behavior. The technique forces Alex to watch propaganda films while injected with nausea-inducing drugs, programming his mind to associate violence with sickness. The novel explores whether government-controlled behavior modification destroys free will, even if it eliminates violence. Burgess created the invented slang nadsat, influenced by Russian, throughout the narrative. The original British edition contained 21 chapters showing Alex's eventual redemption, but the American edition cut the final chapter, ending on a darker note without redemption. Burgess opposed censorship throughout his career, making the book's fate particularly ironic. Stanley Kubrick's 1971 film adaptation became linked to copycat violence in Britain. Remarkably, Burgess himself requested the film be withdrawn from UK distribution in 1973. The film remained effectively banned in the United Kingdom until 1999, after Kubrick's death, making this a rare case where an author contributed to suppressing his own work. The book itself faced challenges in American schools for violence and sexual content. Aurora, Colorado removed it from high schools in 1976. Westport, Massachusetts attempted to ban it in 1977. The ultimate paradox involves a book about government control of behavior, being controlled by its own author, then controlled by school boards. Burgess later expressed regret about writing A Clockwork Orange due to the controversy surrounding it, demonstrating how a work warning against thought control became itself a subject of control by multiple parties for decades. Slaughterhouse-Five. Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, published in 1969, is a semi-autobiographical anti-war novel depicting the Allied firebombing of Dresden through protagonist Billy Pilgrim, who becomes unstuck in time. Vonnegut was a prisoner of war in Dresden and survived the 1945 bombing in a meat locker underground, experiencing firsthand the destruction that killed an estimated 135,000 civilians. The novel's opening discusses censorship Vonnegut's family faced, and throughout the book, the repeated phrase, "so it goes," appears 106 times after every mention of death, creating a haunting rhythm. The Tralfamadorians, aliens who experience all time simultaneously, represent a perspective challenging linear narrative and government control of information. Vonnegut's publishers initially worried about the anti-war content reaching the public. The book contains profanity and graphic descriptions of war's brutal reality that authorities tried suppressing. The fate of Slaughterhouse-Five proved darkest in Drake, North Dakota, where in 1973 the school board literally burned copies in the school furnace. A school board member wrote, "This book is garbage," directly in the meeting minutes. The book faced bans in multiple American schools, including Island Trees in New York, Levittown in New York, and Republic in Missouri. Challenges cited foul language, sexual references, and anti-Christian themes. Vonnegut wrote a famous letter to the school board chairman after the burning, defending literature's role in education. According to some reports, it became among the most banned books in American schools as recently as 2023. The ultimate irony remains that an anti-war book written by a prisoner of war survivor, depicting truths about Dresden that military authorities initially suppressed, was burned by Americans in a literal fire, fulfilling its own prophecy about how uncomfortable truths face suppression, regardless of their validity or the authority of their source. The Handmaid's Tale. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, published in 1985, depicts the theocratic totalitarian state of Gilead in near-future New England, where a fundamentalist regime has stripped away women's rights following a coup. In this society, Women are forbidden to read or write, with violations punishable by amputation of the hand. Universities have closed, libraries burned, and historical records destroyed and rewritten. The protagonist, Offred, whose real name is never revealed, secretly learns to read again as an act of resistance. Women are divided into color-coded castes, including handmaids in red robes and white wings, wives in blue, and Marthas in green. Atwood extensively researched historical events before writing, noting that everything in the book has happened somewhere in reality. The novel contains explicit scenes of book burning and intellectual suppression as tools of religious control. An epilogue features an academic conference analyzing discovered tapes, suggesting the regime eventually fell. The book's fate mirrored its content when religious groups began challenging it in American schools. Texas schools challenged it repeatedly through the 1990s and 2000s for vulgarity and sexual overtones. A California school district removed it in 2012. Kansas faced challenges in the 2020s. The supreme irony emerged when religious communities challenged the book for being anti-Christian. When the novel specifically depicts theocratic censorship and religious authoritarianism. Challenges cited sexual content, profanity, and anti-religious themes. After the television series debuted in 2017, challenges increased dramatically as the book gained renewed visibility. A book about theocratic book burning was banned by communities uncomfortable with its critique of religious authority controlling information, proving Atwood's warnings about fundamentalism's relationship with censorship were not hypothetical, but immediate concerns in democratic societies, where religious groups retain significant influence over educational content. The Satanic Verses. Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses, published in 1988, is a magical realist novel exploring faith, doubt, and identity through two Indian actors who fall from an exploding airplane. The book contains controversial dream sequences featuring a character called Mahound, a name historically used pejoratively for the Prophet Muhammad, exploring the historical controversy over the Satanic Verses incident in Islamic tradition. Rushdie knew before publication the content would provoke controversy. India banned the book first in October 1988, even before most citizens had read it, followed by Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Somalia, Bangladesh, Sudan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Qatar, and apartheid-era South Africa. The most extreme response came when Ayatollah Khomeini issued a fatwa in February 1989, declaring a religious death sentence on Rushdie with a $3 million bounty. Multiple people associated with the book were attacked or killed. Japanese translator Hitoshi Igarashi was murdered in 1991. The Italian translator was wounded. The Norwegian publisher was shot. Book burnings occurred in Bradford, England in January 1989. Rushdie lived in hiding for years under police protection. In August 2022, decades after the initial controversy, Rushdie was stabbed multiple times at a speaking event in New York, losing sight in one eye. The book explores themes of blasphemy, forbidden speech, and tensions between sacred and profane, containing metafictional elements questioning storytelling authority. According to Islamic tradition, the original Satanic Verses incident involved verses allegedly influenced by Satan that were later removed from the Quran. The novel's fate represents the most extreme case of a book predicting religious censorship, then facing attempted murder of its author, proving that warnings about religious authority suppressing challenging ideas remain deadly serious rather than merely theoretical concerns in the modern world. Mouse. Art Spiegelman's Mouse, serialized from 1980 to 1991 and published in 2 volumes titled My Father Bleeds History in 1986 and Here My Troubles Began in 1991, depicts the Holocaust through interviews with the author's father, Wladek Spiegelman, an Auschwitz survivor. The graphic novel portrays Jews as mice, Germans as cats, Poles as pigs, and Americans as dogs in stark black and white illustrations. It became the first graphic novel to win the Pulitzer Prize in 1992. The work contains a meta-narrative showing art struggling with how to represent genocide, addressing explicitly how Holocaust survivors' stories were silenced and how history gets erased or sanitized. The book includes swastika symbols throughout for historical accuracy and depicts the brutal reality of concentration camps. Spiegelman spent 13 years creating the work, conducting extensive interviews with his father. The narrative operates on multiple levels, showing both Vladek's wartime experiences and Art's present-day relationship with his aging father. In January 2022, the McMinn County, Tennessee School Board banned Mouse, officially citing 8 curse words and nudity, referring to a small drawing of mouse characters. Many observers believed the real reason involved discomfort with Holocaust material and the book's unflinching depiction of historical atrocity. The irony proved immediate and stark. A book about the suppression of Holocaust history was banned in America. The ban led to a massive sales spike, with Mouse becoming the #1 bestseller on Amazon. The publisher offered free copies to Tennessee students. As the most recent major American book ban, occurring in 2022, Mouse demonstrates that the tension between protecting historical truth and protecting people from uncomfortable history remains unresolved, proving that books warning about erasure of genocide still face erasure themselves in contemporary society. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.